Welcome back to In Focus SoCal. In Sacramento, state legislators have introduced all their new bills for this legislative session. Last year, approximately 2,300 bills were introduced by the deadline. My next guest is Senator Susan Rubio, who represents California's 22nd District and is a longtime advocate for victims of domestic violence. She's worked on numerous domestic violence policy initiatives during her time in the state Senate. And she joins me now. Good to have you on today, Senator.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing attention to such an important issue.
I want to talk about a law that you authored back in 2021 in relation to a topic that has been very personal for you, that expanded remote court appearances for domestic violence retraining order hearings. And this issue is personal, as you've also appeared remotely in court a number of times in the past year for your own domestic violence case. Can you talk about your experience?
Well, yes, we all come with lived experience when we get to the legislature. And unfortunately, I have lived domestic violence and it's been ongoing. So I have to share, it's been 10 years since my divorce, 7 years since my first restraining order, 5 years since my second, and just a few months back, I got my third restraining order. So that's an indication of how domestic violence sometimes follows a victim even after the relationship has ended. So I do have several bills in this space based not only on my own experience, but based on what I've seen. And so, again, this is very personal to me.
You and I spoke at an event a few months ago, and you told me that one of the things you have been experiencing, even as a legislator, is not being believed, and that women's voices are often not heard and, quite honestly, not taken seriously when it comes to domestic violence. How have you been handling that in your own case?
After my first restraining order, I had to fight the narrative that I lied about my case. Then I had the second restraining order, and I don't think it got any better. So here I am on my third restraining order. So it's about believing victims. If someone like myself, a sitting state senator, is not believed, I worry what happens to that ordinary person behind closed doors who's experiencing domestic violence. So I urge everyone to be more supportive.
And you've authored a number of groundbreaking domestic violence laws, and you have two more that you've worked on this year. Can you talk about both of those, the Reclaim Act and the Domestic Violence Prevention Act?
I've set out to interview victims of domestic violence to see if it's happening across our state, and it is. Usually, abusers will use the court system to continue to abuse their victims by way of coercive control. So, for example, they'll start suing their victims over and over again. It's a way of controlling their finances because victims have to keep paying lawyers to defend themselves, or simply forcing them to show up in person because they have restraining orders, so they're not able to see the victims. And this is a way of keeping them controlled, their time, their finances, their mental health. And so I have a bill called the Reclaim Act that simply states that if someone has a restraining order, that it is presumed that it might be a harassing tactic. So now they have to go to court and show reasonable evidence to a judge in order to be able to move forward with the lawsuit. I personally have spent the last 5 years tied up in legal battles. The good news is a few months back, I won major cases, but nonetheless, 5 years have gone by. Financially, it's been very heavy, and emotionally as well. So I don't want any other victim to ever have to go through this.
And what about the Domestic Violence Prevention Act?
So I wanted to give victims the ability to be notified if their abusers were getting close to either their home or their place of business, because restraining orders are very clear that someone has to stay a certain amount of yards away from the victim. So this bill in particular is going to use a tracking device to notify a victim when their abuser is either has violated the perimeter of the domestic violence order, or just letting them know that they can flee and get to safety if they fear for their life.
Senator, I'm sorry that your own personal experience was the catalyst for you having to create this kind of legislation, but victims of domestic violence are very fortunate to have you as a champion. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.